This is the 100th episode. Please step into my office. Episode 1 was uploaded in September 2021. That was about the Panasonic grid-eye thermal image sensor. Now, a bit over a year and a half later, and a lot of old computers, video cameras, and VCRs along the way, we're onto the 100th video. I'd never thought about making videos before, and one day decided to do it. I'm not sure what prompted that. It was just a random idea that I had. Originally, I was going to do all the videos as a live stream, but then I found that quite difficult to manage since everything had to be right the first time, and yeah, that was a bit difficult. The videos I recorded in long segments with no retakes usually. Then I go through the video and chop most of the quiet parts and pauses to keep up the pace. Almost never scripted because I found them difficult to write and even more difficult to read, as we're discovering right now. I keep going off script and then can't get back easily. Recently I have discovered something that I became very interested and obsessed with, VRChat, which is where we are right now. It has been a great way to reconnect with people since travel has been difficult over the last 4 years. It also has been a great way to explore interesting places like the one we are in now. This has made me think I should look into making another series of videos on my channel about exploring interesting worlds in VRChat. Let me know if you think that would be a good idea. It won't replace or be as frequent as the electronics-based videos, but just something that I found it so interesting coming to these types of places that maybe it would be good to show other people, and then also you can go there yourself if you like. I'm hoping to do more videos related to PCB and electronics design, but those take a lot more work to organize and create than just taking a look at an old VCR, so I have not progressed much with that. Perhaps we can put more time into that once my workload goes down a bit, like that would ever happen. We do still have a lot of VCRs and video cameras to get through though, from my collection, so there will be a lot more taking a look at VCRs because I want to document them for history, and making YouTube videos about them seems to be a good way to do that. Now let's get on to the real stuff. Here I have joined together a few teardown, investigation and review videos that are not really long enough to go by themselves. We have a video mixer, signal generator, VR hardware unboxing, explanation and review, and finally a quick look at a new USB-C PD 3.1 charger that arrived a few days ago. And don't worry, next time we'll go back to looking at old VCRs. I've already got one on the bench waiting for that, so stay tuned. And thanks for watching, subscribing, commenting, etc. over these last year or so. It's been really good. Got here Panasonic production mixer WJMX30. I picked this up recently, well, I don't know, some months ago actually now, and it's got the T-bar for fading missing and the color joystick missing, which is a bit disappointing. I think it's a color corrector thing. But yeah, it's a 2-input mixer with various wipes and special effects and other things you can do for making video stuff. It's a bit disappointing, I guess. It's only 2 inputs. Well, 2 main sources, and it says external camera in. So it looks like you have to push both of those. External cam when both are pushed. Weird. And then there's an output, advanced sync output, so you can feed that back to your cameras to get them synced up. And then a preview and a general purpose. Also serial port, so I guess you can remote control this thing. So I knew these were missing, that's just how it is, I guess. Someone must have liked them for something else. But what I didn't realize is inside there's a cable there that's also missing, and that goes from all of the video I/O onto this main board. Now that's disappointing because the plug is something that's a bit unusual, so I'm not sure how easy that is going to be to replace, so we can try it out. I think we'll get rid of this lid, the control panel part, and then we'll take a look at these boards in it to see what the deal is and decide if it will be easy or not to overcome that missing cable, to see if we can try this out. I have no idea if it works or not. Maybe it doesn't, and that's why those parts have been stolen from it for getting something else working, maybe. I don't know. It was just a thing. It's available as is, unknown condition, so here it is. I think there must have been... oh no, look, here it is. There's a thing for holding the lid open. Because I saw the bracket on this side and thought there must have been some kind of hinge thing that's been removed, but no, it's just that. Anyway, I'm going to take the lid off so it's out of the way, and then we'll take a look at the boards, and then later on I'll decide if it's worth making another video about trying to get it to go. There, it looks like it's the same type, so we'll be able to look at that closely to work out. Oh, they're all the same type. Okay. Well, we can look at that then to decide whether it's possible to make something, or maybe we can just hardwire it by soldering some links. So that's what's on the other side of the control panel. It's just a board with probably multiplexes, all those buttons and lights, because they all have lights, LEDs. And there's an audio mixer. Now see that ribbon cable there. It's an interesting type. I've not seen that on things before. So a wider version of that is missing to go from there to there to bring all of the signals from the connectors on the back onto this, which it says that's analog. So I guess that's the board that does the analog video processing. We'll take it out. Well, we'll take the cover off first so we can see what the circuit is in there, and then we'll take that out and see what the board is underneath. All that is power supply, which then goes up to the top and then onto here, and that's about it, I think. Oh no, that one as well. So each board has got its own connection to the power supply. Guessing the bottom board is digital, since this thing is supposed to be a digital video switcher or whatever they called it. So it probably digitizes the video signals, and maybe that means it can work with ungenlocked or unsynchronized video sources. Maybe, not sure. These things, the other versions of this that I've seen, can they can take one unsynchronized source and then they use that as the thing locks onto one of the sources, and then it provides a sync output for your other source to sync off of. If that makes any sense. So you're allowed, so you can use one video source that isn't gen-locked, generator-locked, or synchronized to something else, and then you have to sync everything else to that. So it looks like 2 channels of stuff that has 2 stages. I'm guessing it's all analog to digital converter things. Some Mitsubishi chip there, and then some Motorola chip there, and then it's the same on that side. And you can see the connector there that is missing for some reason. Does that mean it got broken and they needed it for another one of these? Dunno. Couldn't have thought so. Alright, we'll lift this board up. Has that got a hinge under it? It seems to have a metal bracket there. Don't know, none of the screws are red, so you can't really tell. Is that a hinge? No. Some kind of metal ridge thing on it for some reason. Not really sure why. It's shielded on the back too. I don't know if there's any chips in there. That's where we should look. A bit zoomed in. Now you can see what's going on up there. Be very careful with reflective things. It can cause issues. Wow, look at that. There's a lot of stuff going on the bottom. Double-sided load. I guess that might be through the wave. It looks like it, but there's sort of flux residue stuff on some of those parts. And they tell you what the voltages are coming into there. There's analog 5 volts and plus minus 12 volts. Well, it says A 5 volts, so I assume that would be analog 5 volt. All the outputs of the power supply have got their own fuses on them. Does that mean they're expecting things to happen? Oh, I can see juice on there. So I guess the capacitors in this power supply are wrecked. Yeah, they're juicy. Okay, so probably this thing doesn't work because of that. That's annoying. But that's just life, isn't it? Capacitors, if capacitors are there, they're going to be wrecked. Okay, well that was the analog board. So what is this? It's the digital board. Okay, I guess we don't need to take that out of the chassis. We'll just take a quick peek in there. Oh yeah, what we should have done is looked at that connector that we're going to have to somehow... So that... we need to rewire all that stuff. It's a 40-way connector. I wonder if that could be desoldered and then just a normal pin header and then something like an IDE cable could be used. It does look like normal, like that. Normal pin header pitch. Maybe. If it is, then that's a plan. A normal pin header onto that. And yeah, that will be a lot easier than trying to manually wire all of that. It's all dirty and dusty. Alright, let's see what's under this. Whoa, heaps of chips. So that's got a lot of what are probably custom, those MN things, Panasonic custom things probably, and a whole bunch of RAM, and some NEC chips, and then a few other bits and pieces off in their own little area. That's probably some CPU with a memory backup thing. Yeah, interesting device. Alright, well that was a very brief look at this digital productions mixer. So at a later stage I might make an actual video where we try and get this thing to go. But for now, that's a brief look in it. Look at this thing. Trio AG203CR oscillator. Some sort of signal generator. Output sine wave and square wave. And then to choose the frequency, you have this control which goes from 10 to 100 and some range selections in hertz. So presumably if it was on times 1, then that would be 100 hertz, and that would be 10, and at 1 that would be 10 kilohertz, 100 kilohertz. We'll find out if it works. It's got an amplitude output, an attenuator, and output comes from these binding posts, 600 ohms output. On the back there's a sync input, voltage selector, fuse. I don't know if this works, I just got it and haven't even tried it. We'll have a look inside it, and depending on what we find we'll try it out, I guess. Do you have to take the handle off? No. Okay. Oh, look at that. Well, yeah, I was going to say, do you think that knob turns a variable capacitor? There's the answer. It does. And it does it through this gear, which is quite exciting. Because I was looking at that before, and as you turn it, it appears to move in and out a bit, but it might just be that this gauge thing is bent. But it does have a spring there to... Oh, I see. So that's putting some tension on those gears so that they're meshing really hard so there's no backlash on it. So you can turn small amounts in either direction without there being any play. They've got a pretty basic board and a small transformer, some sort of power supply down there, the rectifier and some outputs. You see, it looks like they provisioned for connectors on the board, but they didn't use them. Wires are just soldered into the board. So that attenuator, it's a rotary switch, it's got some resistors there. And when you push these multipliers, it's changing resistor values from those resistors. And then that's the C, so it is just an RC or CR oscillator like they say. Very simple. Some trimmers there. You can get to those from the outside. So that's for 100 Hertz. 100 Hertz trimming, 1 kilohertz and 1 megahertz trimming on those ones. I guess then you can calibrate it and get it perfect. Right, well, I'll find a scope and some power cords and we'll get this turned on. Okay, we've got the scope there on the... and I'm gonna just mount the probe onto this. Well, it's got binding posts which are a bit... yeah, we'll just clip the tip of the probe under that. It's on 10 times, it should be compensated. I suppose we should check that it's compensated properly. Looks like it's fairly well compensated. This will be... the output of this will be floating, won't it? It'll be a proper sine wave. There's no offset. Okay, let's plug it in. See if any of the smoke comes out. Oh, look at that. Doing a thing. This should be lifted up so you can see what's going on. Okay, it's on the... it's on 100 times and that's set to 100. And what does this show? 10 kilohertz. Square wave? Yeah. There we can gain it off a bit. Okay, let's put it on 1 and put that on 10, and does that make 10 hertz? Looks like it. Fairly close to 10 hertz. Then if it's set to 100, then it should be 100. Yeah, pretty close. So how high does this go? That's a 10k times 100. Is that a megahertz? Looks like it. 1.056 megahertz. Oh, it's on an attenuation. How loud does this go? Not too bad, that's 5 volts per division, so it's doing somewhere around just over 10 volts peak at a megahertz. Pretty good. It's probably because we're not driving into the right impedance. What's the square wave like at a megahertz? It's going a bit rounded and the amplitude's less. Still achieving about 5 volts peak. There you go, useful piece of test equipment if you do analog stuff. And it seems to be working. Could check and maybe replace those input capacitors, but they're probably fine. The output looks pretty nice. Not sure what vintage this is. It's probably from the 80s. Great. I've got some controllers just arrived just today. So I want to have a look at that, and I want to try one thing. Still sealed for VR, because the controllers I have are not... they're okay, but they're not the best. There we go. This is Hello Worlds. Sounds like it's got Velcro. It does, it's just very aggressive Velcro. It's just all the like how to throw it away in about 50 different languages. Yeah, that. See? Safety, maintenance, regulatory, warranty information. That's the most stuff, just repeated in heaps of different languages. Okay, that's interesting, quite nice. So I wanted to get these controllers because it has a touch-sensitive surface, so it can tell when your fingers are there and when they're moving around. Comes with some USB cables and some straps so they don't go flying away. So I need to get some dongles to use these, which will be more of the same dongles that the Vive tracker uses. But they haven't arrived yet, so what I was wondering is, can you plug this into the computer and use it as a wired controller while I'm waiting for the dongles to arrive? Well, I know I can plug the trackers can be plugged into the computer and used wired without needing the dongles, so if these can't, then I could do it the other way around, but it's just a bit of a bother having to wire yourself up with USB cables and not cause a problem when you're flailing about. So let's try it. We'll try a couple of things. I want to see how much power these things draw when they're charging. So we'll look at that first, whether they support any high-speed charging modes or not. More stuff that needs charging a lot. Charges at 1 amp, 5 volts, pretty good, I guess. And I've got another cable here coming from the computer, the USB port, and we'll have a look what happens when we plug this in the other one. It might get a bit sad if it's trying to draw 1 amp out of the computer USB port. But let's see, I've got this thing, USB device tree view, and it's plugged into, the cable is on that port there, so we'll see if any device shows up on there when we plug this in. No. Oh yes, look at that. Valve index controller. Oh, that's exciting. You can see all the details about it there. So maybe I can do that thing that I mentioned before and use these wired until the dongles show up. For some reason they got stuck in shipping for a week and then moved one more position and now they're stuck there, so I don't know what's going on, whereas these just come through really fast. But yeah, they come up as a device, so I'll have to check that if they show up in Steam VR like that. And then I can move my fingers, which is an exciting thing. Okay, I'll put that on to charge properly so that it's ready for later on. I suppose it doesn't need to charge if I'm going to use it with the computer anyway. So while we're talking about VR stuff, I got this, I'm just buying all kinds of stuff because I got really excited about VRChat, the Vive facial tracker. So that thing can, you put it on the bottom of the headset and it looks at your mouth and then does stuff. But you need certain parameters in the avatar to make use of that, so I haven't really done much yet. I installed the drivers and it said it was all good, but it didn't seem to have any preview of what it's detecting from your face, which I thought was a bit weird because I thought you'd need to calibrate it, like what it's like when your mouth's open and when you're poking your tongue out. But apparently not, unless I don't know what I'm doing yet. And then the final thing is eye tracking. So there's some sort of open source project that I was told about where they've worked out firmware and software and things to use these tiny little cameras, like what would be in a cell phone. You stick that in your headset right next to the lens, and then you put some IR LEDs to illuminate, and then it plugs into this little ESP microcontroller. You put some firmware on that with this programming thing. Presumably it goes around that way. It didn't seem to tell you anywhere which way around to put it on. I haven't tried it yet, it's only arrived yesterday. So that plugs into there. I've got an extension cord for it. And then some software runs on the computer, talks over Wi-Fi, and it looks at your eyeball, and then you can send eye tracking commands into VRChat. So that's exciting. If you're fancy, you get a headset that comes with that stuff, but I didn't, so there you go. So we'll see how that goes. Again, it might need extra customization in the avatar, which we'll see. A couple of the Steam VR version 2 base stations that I ordered arrived, and I'm so excited that they've already been unwrapped, so you didn't get to see an unboxing of that. But there was one thing that I observed and thought that's worth showing, is that they roll up the cable properly. So many companies don't do that, and it really annoys me. You get a cable like this, and it's squished up very tightly like this, and you unwrap it, and it will never get the kinks out. It always wants to go back to this shape, kinked up and ugly, and I don't like that. But these people have done it properly. It's rolled up in a round, natural shape, and it will stay nice and straight when you unroll it, so that you can drape it around your room going to these things, and it won't look all ugly and kinked up. So I was very impressed with that. That's exactly what every company should be doing with their cables. Unfortunately, the same company, Valve Corporation, did not do the same thing with the USB cables that come with their controllers, so I've been trying to straighten it out, but it's a really horrible stiff cable that wants to stay twisted up. Not happy with that. Anyway, it's rolled up in quite an unusually tight manner with these little stickers and this double-sided tape or glue stuff, which is quite difficult to remove and difficult to recycle, because now it's mixed plastics and paper in one thing. But look at that, a nice cable that will be good and straight once you untwist it and not look ugly. It's also quite nice and long. Weirdly, they used the Microfit 3 connector at the power supply end. The power supply comes like this. It's got a standard figure 8 connector in there, and then there's various ends which complete that. So you could run it with a cable if you want, because that is, depending on your power strip, not the direction you want it to be in when you got a bunch of them. So yeah, it depends what kind of power strip you got, but if it doesn't fit, then you can pull that off and just use a standard figure 8 cable to have it further away from the power strip. Yeah, but it's got the Microfit 3. I don't know if this is the T or the Molex one, which were weirdly uncompatible once you go beyond, I think, 8 ways. But for the up to that, the Molex and T ones seem to be compatible with each other. Yeah, because it's not really the type of connector you use outside of devices. It's something you use inside equipment. So it's a bit flimsy. Interesting choice. I don't know why they did that. They could have just used another barrel jack like they've got at the other end of the cable. It's also strange how recessed that is, so that has to be certain length, but then they haven't put a sleeve down it. And there's a micro USB socket in there, very deeply recessed, that I think you do for software updates. But yeah, you can't just use any cable with that. You need one that can reach down there. So these things, what they do, we just enjoy peeling stuff off, because apparently that's something that people like to see. Inside here, there's some lasers. There's infrared LEDs that pulse a sync pulse, like flash a sync pulse, and I think other data at some high rate. And then along with that, there are infrared lasers, and they shine through a prism and onto a wheel that is spinning at a high rate, and the beam gets split into a big line, and as that wheel is rotating, that line scans down the room. There's one in an X direction and one in a Y direction, and after the sync pulse they take turns scanning X and Y, and then the other one, and up to however many you've got in your room. And on the devices that is being tracked, like these controllers, there are a whole bunch of infrared light receivers in a number of locations. And what happens is they see the sync pulse, and then they start timers presumably inside them in the microcontroller, and they watch for when the beam comes across and how long it takes to reach from one sensor to another, in what order, for all of the base stations, and then do lots of maths to work out their exact position and rotation depending on the timing of those beams arriving at the various sensors. Yeah, that's something I did. I made a bracket to hold this on my feet in a fairly secure way, but you've got to be wearing shoes or slippers because that's not very nice pushing on your foot. I might make a curved version when I've got time, which will be never, so that it can go directly onto feet. So that's how that stuff works, roughly, with lasers. And that's a nice cable. We'll take a look at, since we did the unboxing of these controllers, we'll take a look at what they're like in the game, or in VRChat, with the finger sensing. Another thing before I forget is we need to check the channel settings on these. So the version 1 base stations, which is what I've been using at the moment, you can only have up to 2 of them. They have a little tiny display in the corner that tells you A, B, C, D. And if you don't have a link cable to synchronize them without them when they can't see each other, you set the channels to B and C. Obviously. It wasn't very obvious. But when you have a link cable connected, you have to set them to A and B. And these ones, though, I think the channels are 1, 2, 3, maybe. Let's look at that, and we need to set them. Well, it might be hard to look at them because, anyway, I might have to set up another camera, because you shouldn't move these things while they're running because they've got a little spinny thing that you don't really want to upset. But I'll turn these on here, just sitting here. And I probably want to open Steam VR as well to see if there's any updates, because everything needs updates, doesn't it? They're probably going to be very angry because they're not sitting in a good location. I'll put them off the edge of the bench so they're not seeing this, and then I'll get the other camera out so we can look at the front of them while they're on, and then continue. And of course, when you're rolling these up, to keep the cable untwisted, you always want to run one in each direction, as you always do with extension cords and other things, so that overall there's no twist put on the cable, and it will always run out clean and straight every time you want to use it. Alright, let's do this. I guess it sorts itself out and we don't have to change the channel. So I've got one sitting there, and there's a tracker for it to look at, and then the other one is up there pointing at it. They don't seem to have little displays on them, so it doesn't tell you what channel it's on, but when you look on the whatever this thing's called, it says there, that one's channel 1, that one's channel 2, and that thing's happy. So I guess they sort the channels out for themselves. I thought you had to push the little button thing on the back that's down a deep hole. Anyway, it looks like it's good. And it also didn't say that they need updates. A little flag would come up on the icons of the base stations if they need updates, and that hasn't happened, so I guess they're all good. everything else I've plugged in has needed updates so far, so that's a surprise that this doesn't, or these don't. Great. For completeness, while we're still here, that's what the version 1 base stations look like. That's the HTC branded one, and they have a very horrible, stiff, kinked up cable with them. It's shorter too, and the power supplies are quite a bit bigger. But since I talked about a small display on them, let's turn this on and have a look at what it looks like. See that? It's set to B. It's got a small B there. Are these worth anything? The version 1 ones? Okay, it was on that one. You can see there's a grid of 9 LEDs which do the sync pulse, and then down there and there are the laser things. You can see it moving slightly there. Are these worth anything? Should we do a teardown of these, or should I try selling them? I don't think I need them anymore that I've got the newer ones. Yeah, so those have a sync connector on it, so if these aren't looking at each other, then you can plug a cable between... Why is the focus not working? You can plug a cable between them, and that way they will be in sync. Doesn't happen anymore with these, I guess, because they have a wider field of view, maybe? Since we peeled those things off, they're gone super static, charged. I don't know. Anyway, let me know if you think we should do a teardown of this, or I should sell it or something, give it away. I don't know. If you want to see inside it, there's things on the internet anyway. People have already done it. Look after your cables. It's really important to roll them up properly. Weird view of my legs in meat space as well as in VR space. We're going to have a look at the index controllers since here they are, and I've been using them now for a couple of days. We also see a new avatar that's in development, but the mouth doesn't move yet. That's a shame. And there's some other adjustments to do. But yes, they got the index controllers, and they've been interesting because if you're lucky, they let you adjust your fingers, but it's a bit problematic, I've found. If you do that a few times, it's supposed to learn them better, but I'm finding it still doesn't like my little fingers very much. And when you rest your finger on any of the buttons, that moves the thumb, and then when you put your index fingers near the trigger, that moves, and it's very sensitive. You can see that how close, or not close, it needs to be detected, which is pretty nice. Those ones are more, it's pushed in or not. My body's drifting away a bit because we're blocking the tracker. Because I'm squished into the corner here. But anyway, yes, index fingers work nice. The other fingers are generally okay. What's really annoying is the menu button, the tiny little button there is very difficult to reach. So you pretty much have to touch it with your thumb fingernail to get it, and unlike the HP controllers, so on these, there are two menu buttons. One that's recessed, which is pretty useless because that's just a start menu button for Windows, but the other one, which is a little tiny dome thing, there's one of those on each controller that you can repurpose. So I had one as the Steam VR menu and the other one as the VRChat menu, but on the index controllers you only get one menu button, and it's permanently assigned to they're both permanently assigned to the Steam VR menu, which is not good, because why do you need two buttons for the same thing? Similarly, by default, these top buttons here both open the VRChat menu. I don't understand what the point of that is. Anyway, once you get all that sorted out, then they're alright when it's detecting your fingers properly. And it's quite nice to not have to be holding something the whole time. Like the other ones, you have to hold onto the controller. You can strap it to your hands, but then it becomes quite annoying because It was convenient to put it down briefly when you got to take a drink of water or whatever. But these ones, they attach themselves to your hands, so you don't have to worry about. I'll try this guy for a bit. An alternative that has the expressions and things working. They are attached to your hands, so you can just be normal, and when you want to pick up something, you just grab it naturally, and that works. And the tracking doesn't go crazy like it was doing on the HP controllers, which is part of the HP G2, Reverb G2 version 2 headset, which tracks by cameras looking at those rings on the controllers. These ones are tracking using the base stations, as we discussed earlier. And they haven't gone crazy since, well, these controllers have not gone crazy, even in very busy worlds with many other people. So pretty good overall, except I haven't got the dongles haven't shown up yet, so I've been having to use USB cables and have a hub down here, which has been quite a hassle. Just what happens, isn't it? Hopefully they'll arrive one day. I hope. So I can use them wireless without having to deal with this. Because even with this, they don't even charge while they're doing this. They still go flat. I think it's because I've got about nearly 8 meters of USB cables here to reach, because it comes out of the computer through an extension onto a hub, then onto I think a 5-meter cable which comes down to the hub here, and then one coming up my sleeve which is a meter or so, the ones that come with the controllers. So it's exciting, and it is really nice to be able to move properly with trackers, although I don't have any knee trackers, so knees are moved by your feet at the moment. How that is happening. You have to buy more trackers if you want to have your knees move independently, like putting trackers on your arms so you can move the arms independently of your hands. Next up, we've got to do eye tracking and mouth tracking, although I think that needs lots of work in the avatar to implement it properly, which may or may not be able to happen. Great. It's also nice to be a Lucario in real life and in ideal life. Yes, now with actual squishing of the thighs when you move your legs, which is a neat feature. They don't just go straight through it. Up to a point, of course. Great, that's the exciting world of VR stuff. Very exciting. People like unboxing, so we're going to do some unboxing. Got here a SlimQ power supply. This one is a new model that I think there were some problems in production, so it was delayed shipping. It's the 150 watt PD 3.1 3C1A. So that seems to be a variant of this one, which is 150 watts, but it's just regular USB-C USB-C PD 3, not 3.1, so it only goes up to 100 watts on those. And then they give you this other cable so you can get the full 150 watts out for charging your laptop. But now with USB-C PD 3.1, you can get 140 watts from the USB-C connectors. That's what this can do. And this other one that we looked at on a previous video, USB-C PD 3.1. And there's a bigger version of this, which is a 100 watt SlimQ power supply. So let's have a look at what this looks like, and we'll try it out and see if we can get the 28 volt output from it. So that's how they get 140 watts. But instead of going up to 20 volts, 5 amps, it goes up to 28 volts, 5 amps. So that's the range from 30 watts up to 150 watts. Oh, and there's bigger ones. Yeah, there's other types for bigger laptops and things, up to 330 watts. And various accessories for that. Here it is. How does that compare? About the same size as the other 150 watt. I guess the input stage of that is the same, and they've changed just the board on the outer edge, which distributes the power and does the USB communication. What else do we get with this? All sorts of things. International converters for different types of plugs. UK and Europe and Australia, New Zealand. That slide onto it, and yeah, if you live in the UK with big ugly plugs, then yeah, you put that on it. Bit annoying if you have to use that. I'm pretty sure this comes with a USB-C cable probably in there. It's got an extension cord for the AC side, which is quite a nice thing. So you can attach this extension cord onto it, and that way you don't have to have this huge thing hanging off the wall, and then the adapters can go on here too. So again, you don't have to have it hanging off the wall. Just quite a nice feature to, yeah, because that's quite a big thing. So it's good if it's on a congested power strip. You can also buy these cables that have various different countries' plugs already molded onto them, so you don't need to use the adapter. You can just use the cord with the correct plug for where you live. And the final box, lots of packaging. Oh, look at that, it's an actual 240 watt, so full USB-C supporting cable. That's good. It's that type that's got that horrible fabric stuff on it. Make it unnecessarily thick and stiff. Seems to be the objective of a lot of companies these days, doesn't it? Make the cables as thick and stiff and annoying as possible. Big fat plugs. It's okay, but I find the leverage on USB-C cables to be quite alarming, how much force can be applied to that very tiny connector. It's a bit dodgy. Anyway, let's juice this up and see what it does. Got this thing. And somewhere there's a whole box of meters and things, so that we can see what happens. Use this one, which supports PD 3.1, and then there's a trigger thing somewhere. Yeah, so this is a trigger board that can do PD 3.1, so we'll see if that works. We should be able to step up through the different voltages. There's 5, 9, 12 volts. And it tells you the rating, what amount of power you could get from it at each step down here. So at 5 volts, it could do 15 watts, 27 watts at 9 volts, 36 watts at 12 volts, 45 watts at 15 volts, 100 watts at 20 volts, and they go 140 watts at 28 volts. That's good. I think the other port supports that as well, maybe. We'll find out. Yes, so two ports support USB-C PD 3.1. I don't know if they do it at the same time. I've got another one of these somewhere we could test that. And then the other one only goes to 20 volts only. So that one's just 100 watts port. That's good. It's very bulging. The sides of this are bulging out, which is a bit concerning. It's like become a spicy pillow. It's perfectly flat on the other 150 watt power supply, but this is bulging out. Is that expected? These are solidly potted, so I wonder if that stuff expanded or they put too much in. That's a bit strange. Anyway, hopefully that's a good reliable power supply. I should do efficiency testing on it and probably make a video of that process, since I have an efficiency testing rig